Title: Night of the Black Howl. It began on the coldest night of the year. Anchorage, Alaska, lay under a thick blanket of snow, the howling wind battering against homes like unseen fists. But the sound of the wind wasn't the only thing residents heard that night. There were the howls, deep, resonant, and unnatural. Brian Thompson, a wildlife officer, sat in his patrol truck, sipping lukewarm coffee and trying to shake off the unease crawling up his spine. Reports had been flooding in all week. Mutilated moose carcasses found on trails, family pets vanishing, and bizarre tracks in the snowmass of paw prints, far too large to belong to any known animal. Tonight, the calls turned darker. A farmer on the outskirts of town claimed he'd seen wolves larger than horses pacing around his property. His panicked voice echoed through Brian's radio. "They're out there, watching. It's not just wolves. There's something else." Brian sighed, pulling on his heavy jacket. It sounded like a crank call, but he'd learned not to dismiss anything out here. He drove to the farm, headlights slicing through the swirling snow. When he arrived, he found the gate open and the silence oppressive. "Mr. Harper," Brian called, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The house stood eerily still, the windows darkened. Snow crunched behind him, spinning around, his breath caught. A mangled cow carcass lay in the middle of the yard, its inside steaming in the freezing air. Massive paw prints led away from the body and into the forest. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled behind him. Turning, he saw them. 3 monstrous wolves, their silver-gray fur glistening in the moonlight, their glowing yellow eyes locked onto him. They were immense, their shoulders nearly at eye level, their lips curled back to reveal jagged fangs that seemed more suited for nightmares than nature. Brian backed toward his truck, his heart hammering. "Easy, easy," he muttered. One of the wolves cocked its head, as if mocking him. Then it lunged. The next morning, Brian's patrol truck was found overturned in a ditch, claw marks gouged into the metal. There was no sign of him except for the blood-spattered snow leading toward the forest. The attacks escalated. Families disappeared overnight, their homes left in shambles. A hiker's body was found torn apart on a trail, his face frozen in terror. The wolves didn't just kill, they hunted with terrifying intelligence. They lured people into traps, using tactics no animal should understand. One victim, a hunter, had been led deep into the woods by the sound of a child's voice crying for help. When he reached the source, there was nothing but snow, and the wolves waiting in the shadows. The wolves didn't attack quickly. They surrounded their victims, circling and taunting, their glowing eyes filled with malice. Their growls seemed almost like laughter as they lunged, only to pull back at the last second, prolonging the terror. They relished the chase, snapping at heels, slashing at legs, watching as their prey stumbled and fell. And when they finally struck, it was methodical. They tore their victims apart, piece by piece, ensuring every scream echoed into the night. The pack's alpha, a black wolf the size of a bear, seemed to command the others with subtle gestures and low growls. They communicated like soldiers, working together to herd their prey into inescapable corners. And when the kill was over, they'd stand over the remains, their breaths visible in the frigid air, as if admiring their work. Sometimes, they almost appeared to snicker, nipping playfully at each other before vanishing into the forest. The townsfolk whispered about the old hermit who once lived on the edge of Anchorage, a disgraced scientist named Dr. Elliot Grayson. Years ago, he'd been fired from a prominent research lab for unethical experiments. He vanished shortly after, but rumors of his twisted work lingered. They said he'd been obsessed with creating a new apex predator, one that could outthink and outmaneuver any living creature. Now, it seemed his creations had returned to haunt the town. By the end of the week, Anchorage was in chaos. Streets lay deserted, the air thick with fear. Inside her small home, Sarah Lewis clutched her daughter, Mia, tightly. The two had barricaded themselves in after hearing about a family slaughtered 2 blocks away. The lights flickered as the storm outside intensified. Then came the sound she'd been dreading, scratching at the door. Mia whimpered, burying her face in Sarah's chest. "Mommy, what is it?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Stay quiet." The scratching stopped. Silence. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears. Then, with a deafening crash, the front door exploded inward. Snow and splinters filled the room as the massive black wolf stepped inside, its glowing eyes scanning the room. Behind it, more shadows moved, an entire pack. Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife, her hands shaking. "Stay behind me," she told Mia, though she knew it was useless. The wolves spread out, their movements deliberate, blocking every exit. The alpha stared at her, its gaze filled with an unsettling intelligence. It tilted its head, almost as if amused by her defiance. Then it lunged. Sarah slashed wildly, the blade grazing the creature's flank. It snarled, its massive jaws snapping inches from her face. Before she could strike again, another wolf barreled into her, sending her sprawling. Mia screamed, her tiny voice piercing the chaos. "Run!" Sarah cried, but the wolves were too fast. They closed in on Mia, their glowing eyes devoid of mercy. Sarah's screams echoed through the house as the pack descended. By morning, the house was silent. The snowstorm had passed, leaving the town eerily quiet. The only sign of Sarah and Mia was the crimson-stained snow trailing into the forest. From the shadows of the trees, the alpha wolf watched the town, its eyes burning with a sinister intelligence. Around it, the pack moved silently, their breath visible in the frigid air. They weren't just wolves anymore. They were predators unlike anything the world had ever seen. And Anchorage was only the beginning.